Are you seeking fulfillment for your life? Do you want freedom from fear? That's why we're here. Welcome to Jesus 101, introducing you to the real Jesus. And now, here's your host, Elizabeth Talbot.
Welcome back to Jesus 101. Thank you so much for joining us for this series on the life of David. We have called it After God's Heart, and we're doing a study in brokenness, the times that David had to learn so much about himself and his God during difficult times. And today we continue his cave time, that in-between time that made him a real person. And I want to start getting real with you too, because, I spent a lot of years, I could say in the church, but not necessarily being real. When there is trouble and people have questions and you go to church late so that you don't have to answer the questions. And I have a few masks here because I think most of us don't wear this, but emotionally we do. So we put these masks and people think we're happy, or they think we're doing okay, and we're not telling anybody how we're really doing. Sometimes is the fault of the group that we belong to that is not safe enough, really. But if that's the case, we have to go get help somewhere else because we need to get real with God. I think David learned a lot of intimacy with God during his real time. I can say that it was during my divorce of many years ago, after I divorced we got divorced with my first husband after 15 years of being married. That is the time when I really became real with God. Before that, everything was great, and even if there were problems, I would never tell anybody. And not that you have to tell somebody, but I didn't even know how to ask for help. So I had a PhD in masks. And one day, things got difficult, and so I started getting help in some programs that I attended and all kinds of things like that. And this man told a story, and the story was about this woman that always had a smile on her face, even though things were very difficult. And one day, she just couldn't take it anymore. She got into the garage, closed the garage door, stayed in the car, and started screaming at God, saying, "Why? Why is this happening to me? I can't believe you would allow this to happen to me." And he said at that moment, that woman felt God's voice, and God said, "It's so nice to hear from you." We can go months and months thinking we're communicating with God, but all we're doing is really going through the motions and this and that, and we have these on. But someday we have to get real, and David got real in his pain. I also got real with God, and I can tell you, my time of intimacy with God happened, and it opened up through my pain. And today, to help us in this topic, once again, we have Pastor Mike Tucker. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great. How are you, Elizabeth?
I am doing great, and thanks so much for joining us again.
I'm happy to be here.
And this is, I brought one for you.
Oh, thank you. And I didn't get you anything.
No. Well, you give me grief all the time.
Good. Then at least it's an even exchange.
Right? So did you have a time in your life where you wore some of these?
Oh, well, yeah. I think everyone wears a mask from time to time, and I did too. I grew up very legalistic, and that's how I can't blame my parents. It's all they knew, but they raised me to be a really good legalist. But you can't practice legalism without wearing one of these. Yeah, it's impossible to be a legalist without this.
Wow.
Because you cannot reveal the true you, and the true you is a person who is broken, who is weak, who is hurting, who has failures, as well as successes.
Yes.
But if you're a legalist, you can't admit to the failures.
Yeah.
Because you don't measure up then.
Exactly, and you're always afraid they really knew who I am.
Yeah.
They really knew what I've been through.
Yeah.
I went through that for so many years, and it's so liberating where you say, "Look, this is who I am. This is what I've been through. Take it or leave it.
Yeah,
it's up to you.
it's
God
me.
has already, He's with me. He loves me, and this is what happened to me. And the fact that He can still use you after all those, So maybe I waited quite a bit of time to talk about it. I've been married to my husband 17 years now, and he had 3 daughters, and I have 3 stepdaughters and 7 grandchildren. And you can't imagine that there's another life after certain things, right?
Yeah.
And people see you on TV and they go, oh, the life must be all together.
Oh, yeah.
But we all
Good luck with
have
that.
a second biography that nobody writes in any programs or in anything,
That's
right?
true.
And David, this is his second biography, because we have David, as the giant killer, as the anointed of God, and this is a time that we can't always put together why God would allow this in his life.
Yeah. But, people have asked me, well, why is God doing this to me? Why is he allowing this? I think that's the wrong question. Why wouldn't it happen to you? You consider the place where we live. This is a bad place. Planet Earth is a bad place.
Yeah, that's why we're waiting for heaven so much.
And so if bad things are happening to you, it's because of your neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
It comes with the neighborhood, and eventually there'll be a time and a place where things don't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as I got older, which I got much older, not as old as you, but
No, of course
I will
not.
never be as old as you, but I got older, and I stopped asking why. I really did. Because I don't understand half of the things that happen. And so I'm not going to try. I trust God. I've seen his heart at the cross, and I trust his hands, and I trust his heart, and that's it. I don't have a lot of answers, which is kind of weird, because when I was young, I had so many answers, and now that I'm older, I don't have a lot of answers.
And if you did have answers, somebody changed the questions, and now they don't match anymore.
It's exactly true.
Why is a natural question, but it's a fruitless question.
Yes,
and there's no answer to that this side of heaven. The better question is who.
Yeah.
Who's in charge? Who am I going to trust?
That's it. And if I didn't have a who, I tell you, whether it was a divorce or whether it was losing my parents or, to cancer, each one of them, 3 different cancers each. And you're like, they served you, God, all their lives. And you are saying, why wouldn't it happen to you? There's cancer around, even, but God has promised to be with you every step of the way. So you're never alone. Today we're going to enter into that period of David's life when it's not just hard, because I was reading a book called Bend in the Road, and he said, the hardest trials are not the hardest trials. The hardest trials are the longest trials.
Yeah,
It's
right.
when it doesn't go away, when you don't see the end in sight. It's like...
I had one trial that lasted 13 years, left me in a state of depression, really, for 13 years. I was untreated depression, I didn't go to counseling, didn't get medication, and maybe should have done both. But it was it was just never ending.
Never ending. You don't see the end in sight. And
it just leave you sleepless in the middle of the night, waking up in a cold sweat.
And that's what happened to David. And David started learning about God from his surroundings. He was so needy of God that he started seeing God everywhere. And before we show you a video that I'm very excited about, we're going to go all the way to the last chapter of 2 Samuel, just to show you how David learned to communicate with God. He started talking, and he became intimate with God. He didn't just talk when things were okay. He talked all the time. He talked when he was angry. He talked when he was sad. He talked when he couldn't understand, and he talked all the time with God. And I want that, not just the smiley relationship between God, but the one that I keep talking to him when I don't understand what's going on. So the last chapter of 2 Samuel is the only psalm-like chapter that we have in Samuel, where it really looks like a psalm. And chapter 22, we're going to read verses 1 to 4 of 2 Samuel.
And David spoke to the Lord the words of this song on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold and my refuge, my Savior. You save me from violence. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from all my enemies."
2 things are so striking here. One is the my.
Yeah.
When you are in the middle of something and you still can say, you are my God. You're not just God or in control. You are my God.
A very personal being. Yes.
Personal. So he constantly uses the first person pronoun.
Yes.
My, possessive pronoun, right? The second one is the visualizations. Rock, fortress, stronghold. Yeah, all these things.
Yeah.
So to understand why David got so acquainted with these majestic views of God, we're going to show you a video. Now, the video is really dear to me because I told you we went to Israel with our team to be able to get some of this footage. And at one point, we went to the desert or the strongholds of En-Gedi, where Saul went into that cave where David cut the corner. And wow, when we looked around, everything was strongholds and rock and fortresses. And so it made a lot more sense for me, the visualizations of what David had around. So our producer and creative director that we have in Jesus 101 will actually narrate this for you and take you along with him to the top of some of these strongholds that were really majestic. So here we go.
As we travel along the Dead Sea in the dead of winter, at 1,400 feet below sea level, it's hot. It's really hot. Even the camels look thirsty. But at 34.2% salinity, there's no drinking this water. In fact, nothing can even survive in it other than small amounts of bacteria. As we venture further north, the hills of Jordan glisten in the sunlight across the Dead Sea as Masada towers on our left. At the top, from upon the watchtower, parched earth and salt water stretch out as far as the eye can see. And I wonder, how did people survive in this harsh wilderness? Much less while running for your life. For it was just 12 miles north of here, in the wilderness of En-Gedi, where David hid from a maniacal king who wanted his life. But as we pass a 3rd century synagogue under excavation at the base of the mountains, I can't help but sense that there is something different about this place. Oh, it is still hot and dry, and I can feel my pale skin burn under the winter sun, but something urges me on. As I start the trek up the mountain, my 40-pound backpack and camera weigh me down, and my legs cry for rest. As I pause to survey my surroundings, David's words echo in my head. My soul is among lions. I must lie among those who breathe forth fire. My spirit is overwhelmed within me. There is no escape for me. But as I continue my journey and draw close to a cave much like the one where David hid, I get chills as I remember his words. My soul takes refuge in you, O God. And in the shadow of your wings, I will take refuge until destruction passes by. But I am hot and exhausted, and my throat is dry as I am humbled by the great faith of this young man. My time is short, and I must press on. A faint, familiar sound lures me as I stumble along. Then as the trail winds through a damp, dingy tunnel, the sound grows louder. Water, blessed water. I can't wait to dive in. And once again, David's words come to mind. Be exalted above the heavens, O God. Let your glory be above all the earth. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises. Awake, my glory. Awake, harp and lyre. I will awaken the dawn. I will give thanks to you, O Lord.
Wasn't that impressive?
It was very impressive. It was a good video.
It's a good video, and
Yeah.
it was quite an emotional experience to be there because we actually went to the En-Gedi Desert, exactly where David was. And you're looking around and you're seeing...
Yeah, so many places to hide, so many strategic places. If you're a military guy, you know,
Yes.
places where you could avoid attack and see
Exactly.
the enemy coming from a long way.
Yes, and there were a couple of caves that were up there that I stayed down, and Chris kept going with it.
You didn't go up there, huh?
Well, I went to halfway.
Yeah.
So Chris kept going up with his camera, and
Yeah.
there were a couple of big caves up there where
Yeah.
they think either that was a cave or one like it.
Yeah.
Where remember when Saul went to relieve himself, we'll go to the bathroom, and David and his 600 men were inside the cave, right? And so you could see the visualizations there that David got. My fortress, my rock, that type of thing. And did you know that, I'm sure you knew, but did you know that David wrote a lot of Psalms at this time?
Yeah.
You know, and these events are narrated in 1 Samuel 22 when he was really having the in-between time that we have discussed before.
This in-between time, especially the cave of Adullam, was really difficult for him. You look at the description of who was in the cave with him. It talks about everyone who was angry, everyone who was in debt, or everyone who was depressed. 400 angry, depressed men, indebted men. You know, isn't that a wonderful place to spend your time, in a cave with that group of men?
Yeah, it's interesting because we have two references, one in chapter 22 and the other one is in chapter 24 of specific places, the cave of Adullam, and then we have the desert of En-Gedi, and they're all in the same area, right? But what Mike just talked about is like, okay, it's bad enough that you're running for your life, that you're in between your anointing and you're appointing, and you're saying, what is going on, God?
And I'm living in a cave.
Now you're living in a cave.
Yeah.
You know, let me tell you a secret that I have never told anybody.
Uh-oh.
When I'm having a bad time in my life, a bad season, a difficult time or whatever, I always go here and going, well, I'm not living in a cave.
At least I'm not living in a cave.
You don't know how many times I've done that, because it's like, okay, it's like, okay, I'm great. I mean, I'm living in a house, you know, no
That's
matter
right.
what. And David is living in a cave, and look to see who comes, chapter 22 of 1 Samuel now. We're going back to the story, 1 Samuel 22, verses 1 and 2.
David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and his father's house heard it, they went down there to him.
Yeah, they're trying to help him in his spirit, you know.
And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was bitter in soul, gathered to him. What a fun group.
Yes.
And he became commander over them. And there were with him about 400 angry, depressed men.
In debt.
In debt.
Yes.
Bitter spirit.
Yeah. When you are called by God, think about this. He's going to train you in the job that is coming, right? I think David never thought, okay, that God was going to say, he needs to learn to lead people, right?
Yeah.
He has already been leading sheep. Now he needs to be leading people. So who am I going to give him?
If you can lead this group, you can lead anybody.
All of Israel, right? So all the distressed, the depressed, they're in debt. And I'm sure he learned a lot. He cried a lot during this time.
I would too. It makes me cry just thinking about it.
You see, Mike cries after every show we have together. No, but the truth is, this is where David learned a lot of intimacy with God.
Yeah.
He cried, really. He cried a lot. A lot of times you hear that he cried out loud. You know, you think of a warrior.
Yes.
You know,
Warrior David.
And he's leading this man, and they cry. They cry often, and we are going to have another show where things got really bad for them. But here we have when David keeps being persecuted. This is the show that we have called Persecuted. It's not just mistreated. Now he's being hunted down by this crazy king, right? So he has to live in caves. Even his family has to come and...
You have to leave the comforts of home.
All of it.
And you don't even have the nice gear that people have when they camp out now.
No,
you know?
no.
There's no fifth wheel. There's no tent. There's nothing. None of the gadgets.
Yes, and all these depressed people, eventually they become 600 people.
Yeah.
Because I guess
It
they
grows. Because misery deserves company, apparently.
It grows. And so he is, again, we have, I talked last program about Lisa Fall, a friend of mine who gave this sermon that stayed in my mind. When you're in between your anointing, that's why we have the horn here, and your appointing as king, which is coming later on 2 Samuel, and all this 1 Samuel 16 on, David is like, what's going on? I was anointed king. So we talked about the in-between, but when the in-between gets long, that's when you find yourself in the cave. And on chapter 23 of 1 Samuel, verse 29, we are told specifically that he went to the strongholds of En-gedi, the ones that we just showed you. And when you look at this and see what's happening, actually, let's read chapter 24. He is in the second cave, in the big cave where they're all inside. And we can, let's...
What, verse 1?
Verse 1, 2, 3, yeah.
When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told, behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men.
And not just 3,000 men, chosen men.
Out of all Israel, and went to seek David and his men in front of the wild goats' rocks. And he came to the sheepfolds by the way, where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave.
Now imagine this, 600 men plus David, they're all holding their breath because here comes Saul, the one that has been making their life miserable, right? And they're going, God is giving you this opportunity, right?
Go for it.
Yes.
Take him.
And
Take
so
him out.
David, just to show Saul, cuts the corner of his robe. And then he is stricken by his conscience, says the Bible.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know what's the big deal of cutting, the robe. Well, at this time, cutting the robe of somebody meant that their role was over. Like if you got divorced, the husband would cut the corner of the robe of the wife, and that meant we're no longer married. Yeah. So when he cuts the robe, what he's saying is that you're no longer king because I'm the one that has been anointed. You're no longer king. And then he was stricken by his conscience, saying, you don't get to say when it's over.
I don't have the right to do this.
Exactly.
And this is God's hand, and here I am taking God's role from him.
Now, there are many Psalms, and I want to show you, but I don't know if your iPhone has subtitles in your Psalms, but I'm going to tell them because Psalm 57, Psalm 142, Psalm 144, you're told that these were Psalms that he wrote when he was escaping. For example, Psalm 57, the subtitle says, when he fled from Saul in the cave.
Right.
So you know that he wrote this psalm. Isn't it striking that he's writing songs in the middle of running? And then, of course, the ones that are most known are the 142, Psalm 142. Now, you already saw the video. You saw what David was seeing at that time. So this would make a lot of sense. Psalms 142, when he was in the cave. So he writes this psalm when he is in the cave. Is your iPhone working?
Yes, it is. A maskell of David when he was in the cave.
Oh, so you do have subtitles in the iPhone.
Isn't that exciting? What
your
the phone will
iPhone is very, very special.
It's very advanced.
Yes, especially Siri that understands your accent.
Yes, that's right.
Okay,
with my voice, I cry out to the Lord. With my voice, I plead for mercy to the Lord.
Yes, and he's writing this in the cave.
Yeah.
Now look at number 144. We're going to go back to the visualizations, and we're going to draw something so that it might help you if you're going in an in-between time right now. We're going to read these possessive first-person visualizations that David has. So we're going to do 1 and 2. Yeah.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. He is my steadfast love and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield, and he in whom I take refuge, who subdues people under me. You
know, these Psalms have what we just discussed, the my. You know, what do you think it takes for you to be in the middle of the cave in a long trial, no end in sight, and say, you're still my God?
Yeah.
My fortress.
It is an incredible amount of faith, and it takes rising above your feelings. But I do find it interesting that he says, my steadfast love. Steadfast love is taken from the word hesed or chesed, depending who's transliterating it, the Hebrew word, which refers to a love so fanatical and so intense that it's only used to describe God's love for you. So it says, I'm the object of your fanatical, crazy love. And that's what he's reminding himself of, even in the cave.
That's fantastic. The hesed word that you're saying in Hebrew has been translated in so many ways in English because we don't have any one word.
That's right. Steadfast love, mercy, love, a variety of ways that it is translated. It takes 26 English words to translate this word.
You know, Ty Gibson has like 151 book that he found that translated in English.
Yeah.
It's amazing because it's so incredible that we don't have one word to do it. Now, let's make a little exercise, Mike.
Oh, okay.
So let's say right now you're in a long in-between time and you need to find visualizations. Of course, we're not living in a cave. So what would it be? God, you are my... What would it be?
But you know, the first thing that comes to my mind right now is my friend or my comforter. As you mentioned, I think, I don't know, this show or an earlier show, how isolating our job tends to be because you go one direction, I go another direction, I travel alone, I live alone, and I grieve alone. And so to have someone who is ever present, who hears, who is there, it's not really a picture of a stronghold, but it is something that's very important to me.
Well, but that's what I mean. That's
my comfort.
That's what David needed.
My friend.
And so my stronghold, my fortress, I would say, you know, also my friend, but for example, my provider. When you don't know where the next thing is going to come from, whether it's a thought or whether it's money or whatever. You're my provider.
Sermon, whatever it may be.
Yeah. You're my bread. You are. We have a song. You are the air I breathe. You know, those are all visualizations of God.
You talked about my provider. One of the things since I've lost my wife is I've not been able to write a sermon or much less a book. I just can't concentrate that long, and yet I've had to have new material. And so what I've done is I've just studied, and then I try to get an outline in my mind, and I start up a preach. Basically, Lord, this has got to be your sermon. It's got to be your words, and He has never failed me. He has provided for me the things that I needed to minister to people at every stage.
That's always the way it is. I'm going to head to the cross. Thank you so much for being with us, Mike. And as we head to the cross, did you know that Jesus also had a very real moment with God at the cross? You know, Jesus actually gave Himself, all of Himself, without really knowing the outcome. And so at that point, He used a psalm, Psalm 22. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, says, it was in the original language, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? You know, El is God. You know that because Emmanuel means God with us. L-E, that E there, that I, means mine. And for me, the fact that Jesus is at the cross talking to God and saying, I can't see a thing. I can't see beyond this. I don't know what's happening. I don't know why I can't feel you close like I always felt you, but you're still my God. My God, why have you abandoned me? And the answer truly is He was abandoned so that you may never be. All of our sins, all of our tears, all of it was placed upon Him at that moment. And He felt truly abandoned, but God was still His God. As a matter of fact, Jesus used to call God Father, but not in this case, because He feels away from it. So He calls Him my God. And you know, He was abandoned so that you may never be. So if you're going through a long in-between time, don't forget that God is with you and He will never leave you nor forsake you.